Hi, and welcome to this live reading from Xenia Navarro and the Magic Ants by Lois Wickstrom and Milagros Darling. And this is presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Chapter 1, The Spy and the Ants. Xenia Navarro squatted in the shade of the sunflowers and watched ants crawl in and out of the ant hill. The hill mounted beside a weird rock that was black and misshapen and covered with thumbprint-like depressions. It looked like something from outer space. Ants picked up bits of black dust from the rock and carried the particles into their home. "There's something wrong with you, girl," shouted the man who lived in the white wood slatted house across the chain-link fence. Xenia recognized his voice. She didn't have to look up to know her unpleasant neighbor was wearing his 39ers sweaty t-shirt with holes in it and had binoculars hanging from his neck. Her mother had told her, "Mucho cuidado con el vecino," watch out for the neighbor. He was the angry sort of man who liked to make trouble. The neighbor's man's shoes always thumped as he came down the wooden steps of his back porch. The dry grass in his yard crackled as he stomped towards her. Xenia continued watching the ants. She knew the neighbor man had money, lots of it. Her house was the last in a row of identical houses built for the low-income families of Philadelphia. Hers was yellow. The one next door was green. The one next door to that was pink. Next door to that was blue. Then the colors started over again. The neighbor man called the row of small houses a ticky-tacky. His real house was at least 3 times the size of hers, and he lived in it all by himself. Xenia wondered what he did with all the rooms. Mama had warned her to nunca ser grosera, never be rude. This suited Xenia just fine. She always tried to protect people from problems she didn't think they were strong enough to handle. She made up stories about a nicer world rather than get people upset. Now, she interpreted never be rude as don't talk to the neighbor man unless absolutely necessary. Mama had said, "El vecino nos espía." The neighbor man spies on us. We have to be careful. Mama had stayed in the United States long past the time when her fiancé visa had expired. Technically, it was illegal for her to live in the U.S., but so long as she stayed out of trouble, nobody would notice her. She had a job, and the government left her alone. Ever since Xenia was little, Mama had told her she had to be good at all times. If she caused trouble, that would mean trouble for Mama. ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement, would come for Mama. They would arrest her and send her away. Xenia loved her Mama. Her daddy had died before Xenia was born, and Mama had stayed in the United States to honor Daddy, and because she believed it was best for her children. Xenia looked up admiringly at the sunflower closest to the anthill. It was the tallest one. The giant sunflower had a huge head full of plump sunflower seeds surrounded by deep golden petals. Grown-ups usually thought it was good for children to study science, so she pretended she was studying the flower. There was no point in admitting that she enjoyed looking at the beautiful petals and the traveling ants who made patterns in the dirt. Now that she thought about it, she needed to do a science project. She could make a project with the sunflowers and ants if Mama liked the idea. She had to be careful with her science projects. They had to be good. They had to be just good enough to get a good grade. Getting good grades was part of how she and her big brother Lucas kept out of trouble. But not good enough to win any prizes, so she wouldn't be in the newspaper and draw attention to Mama. The neighbor man was still watching her, probably hoping she'd do something he could complain about. She had to do something normal so he'd go away. She picked up the soccer ball she'd left in the yard and gave it a bounce. Her block's team usually won the neighborhood competition. Her foot passing was good, but it was her spatial awareness that always had her in the right place at the right time. The neighbor man wheezed, then cleared his throat. That meant he was going to walk. He was going to talk, and she was supposed to listen and report everything he said to Mama. She dropped the ball. "How come you're the one who's always getting dirty like a boy should? And your brother, the thief, sits around reading fairy tales all day like a girl." The neighbor man often complained about how boys and girls should be different from the way they really were. This didn't seem like spy talk, but why did he think Lucas was the thief? With his bad leg, Lucas couldn't sneak around, and he was the most honest person she knew. Xenia was glad Mama hadn't said she must talk with the neighbor man. She turned her attention to the ants. Their pattern had changed. Now they were making a line towards the trash can. Not just towards it, they were climbing up its side, over the lip and under the lid. What were they doing in there? What ants do in a trash can might make a good science project. She took the lid off the can. Do you have to open your stinky trash just when I'm enjoying my yard? Don't your mammy feed you enough? Asked the neighbor man. He coughed. You need to eat the trash? Xenia couldn't take the man's insults anymore. She wasn't allowed to tell him that if he can't say anything nice, he shouldn't say anything at all. Mama said that to her, but it was something adults said to children, not the other way around. She had to tell the neighbor man a nice story so he would stop spying on her and go back inside his house. I'm studying ants for my school science project, she said. Even if he didn't like the idea, at least it sounded normal. Put that lid back fast, said the neighbor man. I don't want you attracting pests to our neighborhood with the leftovers of your mammy's stinky cooking. Xenia lowered the lid and glared at the man. Everybody's garbage smelled about the same, but nobody could hate the aroma of Mama's prize-winning meals. Mama's cooking brought folks from miles around to dine at El Esqueleto Feliz, the Happy Skeleton restaurant. Maybe the neighbor man was just being mean because he was jealous. Sometimes Xenia wondered how Mama's cooking could win prizes without attracting attention of the government. Xenia had eaten Mama's cooking for all of her 12 years. She was strong and healthy. Her brother Lucas had eaten Mama's cooking for 14 years. If you didn't count his leg limp from a bicycle accident, he was healthy too. The neighbor man was often wheezing and coughing. Maybe he'd get better if he ate some good cooking. She put the lid back on the can. The neighbor man went back to his porch. As soon as she heard the porch door close, Xenia lifted the trash can lid again slowly so as to make as little noise as possible. Then she looked down at the ants. They had formed a group. Together they were carrying one of Mama's stale marigolds or papillas up and out of the garbage sack. She hadn't known ants could work together like that. When the ants got to the lip of the can, they bunched even closer together like customers at a sale trying to get the last doll. More and more of them. They pushed. They adjusted their positions. They pushed again. The sopapilla wobbled. Then it fell back into the trash can. The ants disappeared. She felt a tingling on the tip of her fingers and checked them, but there was nothing wrong. Now, a mouse was carrying the sopapilla up the wall of the can. The mouse hadn't been there before. Xenia was sure she'd have seen it, even though she was watching the ants. The sopapilla belonged to the ants. The mouse wasn't stealing it. The mouse skittered up the inside of the trash can. It kept from the rim. Then it scooted along the ground, clutching the sopapilla like a trophy. You've got mice, accused the neighbor man. He was back on his porch again, spying on her. That's a violation of city code. You should be evicted. The neighbor man shook his fist. Xenia saw red marks on his arm. They looked infected. Had he been bitten by a mouse? Were the mice coming from his house? Xenia ran through the possibilities in her mind. The neighbor man was already outside. He was already angry. Maybe she could at least save the sopapilla for the ants. The mouse was scampering toward the anthill. She didn't know if a mouse could hurt ants. Xenia liked the ants and wanted to protect them. She slammed the lid down on the trash can. She hoped the clang would frighten the mouse. At the sound, the mouse stopped running. It shook, unable to stand still. The lid vibrated. The clang became deeper and slower. The mouse looked at Xenia. To Xenia's astonishment, the mouse continued shaking. It didn't just shake, it was breaking apart into at least 100 little pieces. She felt tingling in her hands again. It felt like ants on her hands. She checked. No ants. Each piece of the mouse wiggled and grew tiny legs. Each piece was an ant. Together, they ripped the sopapilla into little ant-sized burdens and carried them down the hole at the top of the anthill out of sight. Xenia decided she would ask Lucas later to look up mice that turn into ants on his tablet from the thrift shop. Mama didn't have money for internet service, but Lucas had found a neighbor whose internet password was easy to guess. Somebody who called his router 39er. Lucas told her that if he was only online for a few minutes at a time, the neighbor would never suspect that Lucas had cracked his dumb password. Right now, she had to figure out how to calm the neighbor man down so he wouldn't call ICE. The neighbor man coughed again. Why couldn't he stay in his nice big house? Xenia looked at him. He leered back. I saw you trying to lift that ugly rock. Want me to get it out of your garden? Xenia froze. Mama was very fond of that rock. She said it reminded her of her friend Anna back in Jalisco. Mama would not want the neighbor man to take it away. When Xenia had wanted to move the rock, it felt very heavy. Mama said, it is good for the soil. Anna has one like it in her garden, and she has the best gardens I've ever seen. Only her calendulas, marigolds, and ours grow in the dark and have a sweet scent like honey and anise. Something in the neighbor man's voice sounded sneaky. He was not the sort of man who helped people. It's not mine, said Xenia. It belongs to the landlord. She knew that their landlord didn't care about a rock in the garden, but if the neighbor man wanted the rock, there must be a good reason he shouldn't have it. I'll talk to your landlord, said the neighbor man. His voice held a threat. That rock could cause trouble if it fell into the wrong hands. That night during dinner, Xenia didn't want to look at her mother, so she looked at the photos on the wall. She knew she was supposed to report on the neighbor man, but Mama would be angry if she knew he didn't like her cooking and wanted to take the big rock. It wasn't spy stuff. It wasn't about calling ICE or hating immigrants. So Xenia kept looking at the photos on the wall. There was a big portrait of her father in his army uniform. Mama still loved Daddy. She had wanted to marry him in Jalisco with her family around. Family should be there for a wedding. Daddy's family had died before he met Mama. Sometimes Xenia wished Mama would marry someone else, but whenever she asked, Mama said, I will marry when I fall in love. Xenia knew love was hard work. Sometimes it was hard for her to love her brother Lucas, and he was family. She would have to wait until Mama found the right man. She looked at the photo of her grandparents, Abuela and Abuelo, who lived in Mexico. They stood in front of the old church where they had gotten married. The label under the picture read, Parroquia Santiago Espistolo. Lucas had looked it up. The church was in Tequila, Jalisco, near the middle of Mexico. On the other wall hung Mama's cooking diploma she'd earned in Mexico from the Culinary Arts School of Tijuana, the Gastronomy College of Jalisco, Saison Cooking School, and even one certificate from the famous Le Cordon Bleu Universidad in Mexico. After they cleaned up from dinner, Xenia's mother sat on the couch with her cup of manzanilla chamomile tea to watch her favorite cooking show. Xenia wanted to talk to her mother, but she knew not to interrupt when her mother was talking to the cook on the TV screen. It's not smooth enough. It needs a dash of cumin. Xenia waited for a commercial. Then she blurted, Mama, we have weird ants in our yard. They love your marigold sopapillas. And what's weird, really weird, they turned into a mouse and carried one out of the trash can and took it back to their anthill. And I think they bit our spying neighbor, Mr. Truck, because he has red marks on his arm. Mama turned off the sound on the long infomercial for funny-looking exercise equipment so they could talk. Otra vez inventando cosas tantita? Are you making stuff up again, silly girl? Asked Mama. Mama gave her a shoulder squeeze that meant, I love you, even when you're being silly. That squeeze always made Xenia feel safe. Xenia shook her head. The ants really took one of your sopapillas out of the trash. I believe hormigas, ants, steal sopapillas. I don't believe they turned into a mouse, said Mama. We have a clean house. We do not have mice. El gato callejero, the feral cat, takes care of the mice. That is why I let him in our yard and give him water. If our spying neighbor got bit by something, it wasn't our fault. Xenia pursed her lips the way she did when she was making a decision. But before she could say anything further, her older brother Lucas looked up from his tablet, where he was writing poetry, and cleared his throat. Sopapillas, fragrant pillows, said Lucas dreamily. I'll write a poem about their brief sweetness. And I'll buy insecticide tomorrow, said Mama. Esas hormigas desbarrancen ya. Those ants will be gone in no time. Please, can we keep them? Asked Xenia. I think they would be great for the science fair. She wanted to study their ability to turn into a mouse, but Mama would never believe her. Xenia decided it was a good thing her mother didn't believe her about the mouse. If she had believed Xenia, Mama would have put out a mouse trap by the anthill before nightfall. Could a mouse trap kill a mouse if it was really ants all clubbed together? She didn't want to find out. So she said, I think they make the sunflowers grow tall. I was studying them, and Mr. Truck interrupted me. You know our neighbor isn't named Mr. Truck, said Mama. I raised you to be polite. You know you should call him by his real name, Mr. Tucker. Mama took a long sip from her cup of tea. She always took long sips when she wanted a moment of silence. Xenia was using a metaphor, said Lucas. She called the man a truck because he looks like a truck, and he acts like a truck, all big and bossy. He put his tablet's pen in his mouth to show he was thinking. Mama gave him the look that meant, stay out of this. Lucas ignored her. If I promise to call him by his proper name, can we keep the ants? Asked Xenia. Ya dia que no. I said no. Ants are filthy. I don't want them in our yard. Mama put her cup down, indicating the discussion was closed. I'm sure you'll find another science project. Besides, you're behind in all your homework for everything but gym class. Bring your grades up before you start something new. Xenia paused and took a deep breath. Then she knew what to do. Those ants were smart. Later that night, when Xenia took out the trash can, the kitchen trash, she carried the small flashlight from the kitchen drawer. Mama kept it there in case of a power failure. Mama was prepared for everything. Xenia beamed the light around the neighbor man's yard. He was not there. She lifted the trash can lid. No ants. She put the trash bag from the kitchen into the can. Then she put the lid back as quietly as she could. Again, she scanned the neighbor man's yard with the flashlight. When she was sure nobody was watching, Xenia shined the flashlight beam at the anthill beneath the giant sunflower. The soil around the ugly stone looked as if somebody had been digging it up, but it was interrupted before they dug deep enough to take it. No ants were visible. Maybe they're asleep, she thought. She never looked for ants at night before. She didn't notice the neighbor man watching her from his window. She didn't know that the flashlight beam made her easy to see. Xenia squatted down and spoke into the hole at the top of the mound. Mama is going to poison you all tomorrow. You better move away from here for a while. She looked at the anthill, hoping an ant would come out and say thank you for the warning. But the only sound she heard was the music from the television announcing that the news was about to start. She went back inside. On the television, a distressed mother was found hiding with relatives because immigration took her 10-year-old daughter from a Southern California hospital. The government waited until the girl was discharged from surgery, then they took her to a detention center. The government said they were going to deport the girl because she entered the U.S. illegally when she was 6 months old. They don't even respect sick children, said the announcer. Because it can happen any time, we recommend all undocumented immigrants have a plan for their children. Here are a few ideas. Did you hear that, mija? Said Mama. Do you remember where we keep our contingency plan? It is in that big manila envelope you keep on your bookshelf in your bedroom, replied Xenia. It's got all the documents, phone numbers we need to call, and a list of important things to take. Take my recipe box too, mija, said Mama. I'll need it if I ever start my own restaurant.